我这条命是你给的，你这条命也得我说了算。
Call of Duty is slowly but surely disappearing from people's mind. We don't care anymore, it just lost its soul a long time ago, and there's really nothing else it can do. Now there's a new game wishing to fill that void, where you can enjoy a proper, realistic single-player experience. There's a new shooter quietly emerging that could reshape how a lot of players see the World War II FPS genre. A title that doesn't come from a major Western publisher, but from a Chinese development team aiming to tell a war story that's rarely explored in games, with cinematic combat and historical grounding that feels different from the usual Cold War era multiplayer shooters dominating the market. The Defiant is being developed by Wu-Tain's Technology. It's described as a first-person action game built around the Sino-Japanese conflict of the 1930s and 1940s, a setting that isn't often featured in mainstream shooters. On Steam, the game's core pitch emphasizes walking on land irrigated with warm blood, stepping into environments shaped by intense historical conflict, and embodying resistance fighters in a war that has been largely absent from the global FPS zeitgeist, especially in mainstream Western releases. This isn't a generic Call of Duty clone. From what can be pieced together from the game's Steam page and early trailers circulating online, the Defiant positions itself squarely as both a story-rich single-player and potentially co-op experience, while also embracing elements that go beyond linear missions. The tags attached to its Steam listing explicitly mention adventure RPG elements and both single-player and online co-op modes, suggesting the developers are thinking beyond a simple corridor shooter. One of the first things that stands out in the early footage and promotional descriptions is the emotional framing of the setting. You're part of the Northeast Anti-Japanese United Army, a resistance group fighting back against imperial occupation. The language used in the store description reads more like historical testimony than marketing copy, underlining that this is a game rooted in context, not just combat arenas. It foregrounds atmosphere, terrain, and narrative at least as much as firefights. Visually, the Defiant has been shown running with solid rendering quality that leans into the gritty realism of 1940s battlefields. Snowy forests, heavily guarded enemy lines, and bombed-out villages appear in the snippets of footage that have leaked and been shared across social platforms. There's a sense of scale and environmental variety, not just open battlefields, but also close quarters combat in dense, dangerous paths behind enemy lines. Weapons play a central role not just functionally but narratively. The Steam page specifically calls out the historical guns you'll handle in the game, including rifles like the classic Hanyang rifle, military pistols like the Mauser, and submachine guns that were part of the period's arsenals. The way these weapons are described, not just as tools but echoes of history, suggests the team is trying to give the combat a weight that's tied to the era itself. Gameplay snippets in existing trailers show a blend of intense gunplay, tactical movement, and cinematic staging. Far from static battlefield sequences, what we've seen includes night raids, stealth approaches under searchlights, and moments that feel more like set-piece infiltration missions than run-and-gun levels. There's also early enemy AI that appears to react dynamically, using searchlights and cover in ways that hint at layered mission designs rather than strictly linear engagements. What's interesting about the Defiant's concept isn't just its historical setting, but the emphasis on the resistance narrative itself. Most shooters that tackle World War II focus on the European theater or the Pacific in a broad, generalized sense. This game pivots into the Chinese theater of the war, which was massive in scope and horrific in scale, but rarely portrayed in mainstream gaming. That choice alone sets this project apart and gives it a story reason for players to care about the battles they're fighting. Players have also noted that there's a translation layer around the game's title. Some early footage showed the project referred to in Chinese as the Resistance, while the English branding appears to settle on the Defiant. The game identifies with the fighters themselves, not abstract military campaigns. Another aspect worth noting is the potential co-op and multiplayer scope hinted at by the Steam tags. While single player seems central, the inclusion of online co-op suggests missions could be tackled with friends, or that larger encounters might be designed to accommodate more tactical collaboration rather than solitary progression. If that element is carried through into the final release, it could set the Defiant apart from many other recent historical shooters that treat co-op as an afterthought. From a development perspective, this project also signals something broader about where the global FPS space is heading. Chinese developers have increasingly been crafting projects with international ambitions, taking lessons from big West Western and Japanese studios while applying them to narratives and historical contexts familiar to their own culture but intriguing to worldwide audiences. The Defiant fits into that trend. It's not content to be a regional title or a copycat franchise entry. It's trying to find its own voice within a genre that has been dominated for years by a handful of larger series. There's no official release window yet beyond the standard coming soon on Steam, and community response so far comes mostly from curiosity and shared footage, rather than hands-on impressions. But what's clear from the early material is that this is a shooter built with intentionality around setting, narrative, and atmosphere, rather than one relying purely on formulaic mission structures. And stepping back a bit, it's hard not to notice a broader shift happening around games like The Defiant. More and more, it feels like the responsibility for pushing the medium forward is falling to developers outside the traditional Western system, especially Chinese studios and independent teams that aren't locked into the same corporate structures and expectations. That's not to say every Western studio is doing the same thing, but the pattern is hard to ignore. A lot of big budget projects are now built around risk management first, monetization strategies, live service hooks, broad messaging meant to appeal to everyone and offend no one, and design decisions shaped by shareholder expectations rather than player experience. The result is often games that are technically impressive but creatively cautious, designed to extract long-term engagement rather than deliver a strong, focused experience. By contrast, what we're seeing from teams behind projects like The Defiant feels refreshingly different. These developers aren't trying to chase trends or stretch a concept into an endless service. They're building something specific rooted in a clear vision and trusting that players will meet them there. That mindset has already paid off in a big way recently, with games like Black Myth proving that there's a massive global audience for titles driven by cultural identity, strong art direction, and confidence in their own ideas. What's important here is that these studios aren't elevating games by being louder or more expensive. They're doing it by being more intentional. They focus on mechanics that feel good, worlds that feel lived in, and experiences that respect the player's time and intelligence. There's less emphasis on chasing metrics and more emphasis on making something that stands on its own. For players frustrated by the recent trajectory of some big franchise shooters, where design choices sometimes feel dictated more by annualized business models than by creative vision, all of that makes The Defiant a title worth watching closely between now and its full reveal. Whether you're drawn in by its setting in a lesser explored theater of war, its potential single-player and cooperative moments, or simply the promise of solid, grounded shooter gameplay rooted in real history, the game's early details point towards something with the potential to sit alongside more mainstream shooters in terms of scale and ambition.